We're on Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis, and we're up to Omar Rav. So let's see if we can count it.
If it's a Rugu, that's fine.
Oh, all right.
I think that's pretty.
Just let me see if I can find Omar Rava. We're going to probably count up from the bottom about 11 lines, maybe. The first word in the line is Bidoraisa. How many lines up is that from the bottom?
Something like that.
Around 11 lines, 10 lines up. Okay. Let's just see if we can, at least begin, with a soft takeoff, so to speak. We're talking about a case where a man went ahead and it was miyabhem, the Yevamot, and she was pregnant. And it all depends now on whether or not she gives birth to a viable Vlad. In event that she does, then she becomes an Erev Veshus Actus, no Zikas Yibum, and obviously has to divorce her. But we're talking about a case where, at the end of the day, she gave birth to a Nefel, right? To a stillborn that had no viability. So it turns out that the Yibum was viable. Okay. However, even though the Yibum was viable, we imposed the penalty on him because he had no right to be miyabim her while she was pregnant. And Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion, quoted here on Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis, that he's got to divorce his wife. Which means the following, that since she gave birth to a Nefel, even though the Yibum is a valid Yibum, but he put his head into a Suffolk Iser Karetz. And therefore we're going to demand that he divorce his wife. We'll see later on what the implications is if he's a Kohen. If he divorces her, he can't remarry. Now, Rava had a brisa, and again, a brisa that's authored by Rabbi Meir, and Rava, decided to identify the two shitos, that of Rabbi Lazar, in the case of a man who was miyabim Muberes, with the shita of Rabbi Meir. Because Rabbi Meir likewise has a very severe knas. And what was the case? Where a woman either was divorced or widowed, and a man comes along and marries her within 24 hours. Now, what's the specifics? She is either a meidekes or she's pregnant, and she will give birth. And if you remember our discussion of last week, breastfeeding is absolutely critical. So the Rabbanan made Xera, and they said, you're not allowed to marry a woman. Let's take the simple case, who is nursing. We have to wait until the baby is 24 months old. Because if you marry this woman, she may become pregnant while she's nursing, and as a result, she'll have to terminate her nursing. And the baby now, the little infant who's less than 2 years old, his life is in jeopardy, his or her life. So Rabbi Meir says if a man went ahead and violated this Isur and married a woman who is either pregnant or nursing within the 24-month period of time, then we're going to penalize him and he's going to have to divorce his wife. And Rava makes the analogy between these two cases in which a person, because he violated the prohibition, we're going to force him to divorce his wife. The Chachamim, in that price that Rava quotes, say that what does that mean? That although we have to separate this man from his wife for the 24-month period of time, but after that 24-month period passes, then he's allowed to marry her, to be married to her. Whereas Rabbi Meir says, lo lamas, he can never remarry her. He's got to divorce her. And Abaye says, here on Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis, in the middle of the Daf, that it's not a fair analogy. You cannot equate Rabbi Eliezer's case with the case of Rabbi Meir. You can't force Rabbi Eliezer's hand, twist his arm around his, and force him to accept Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Eliezer is talking about a person who had a suffix Iser Karetz. When he had a relationship with this woman, we don't know if she's going to carry till full term and the baby will be viable, and therefore he's being Boel Eishasah. Hence, he deserves to be taught and fed. He's going to get the full brunt of the knas. We're not going to let him remarry his wife. But Hassam, that's not, you cannot force Rabbi Eliezer to accept the case of Rabbi Meir, where he violated Isa D'Rabbanan of marrying a Muberes or a Meinekes. There, maybe Rabbi Eliezer would accept the Rabbanan sheet, and we could be a little more laid back about it. And we're not going to impose such a penalty that he'll never be able to marry this woman. Abaye asks the opposite side as well. Maybe Rabbi Meir would be more machmir in his case, but not necessarily accept Rabbi Eliezer's case. Why? Because in the case of Rabbi Meir, we have a principle, when he scoffs or disregards, ignores the Isa D'Rabbanan of marrying a Muberes or a Meinekes, we have to come down on him with the full brunt of the law, because many people have a laid-back attitude. I don't know if you've ever heard this. Maybe you don't circulate amongst these kinds of people, Baruch Hashem. But there are many people who say, well, it's only D'Rabbanan. You can violate a D'Rabbanan. So paradoxically, we're going to be more machmir in a case of a knas for someone who violated an Isa D'Rabbanan than we would in a case of someone who violated a suffix Isur Kares D'Oraisa. And now we're up to Amar Rav. This is where we're going to start today. Amar Rava u'ledivrei chachamim. If a person violated this Isur D'Rabbanan, he married a pregnant woman, and the Rabbanan say that on a temporary basis, we have to wait until the 24-month period peters out, is Yotzia beget. It means that Rava sheds a new light or reinterpretation of the Rabbanan. We thought that the Rabbanan was saying that during this 24-month period of time, we separate the husband from the wife. That's called lefrushe. No, says Rava, even according to Chacham, who are a little bit more lenient than Rabbi Meir, they won't go as hard down on this person as Rabbi Meir would, but nevertheless, they agree that he has to divorce his wife. He's not going to be allowed to maintain this marriage relation from a distance. You know, she's there and I'm here, and we don't mix. No. Yotzia beget. And then, after 24 months pass, he can remarry her. Again, that's not going to be an option for a Kohen. I'm going to quote a brisa that seems to indicate that Rava is correct. The Katani Yotzi. The Lo Katani Yafish. The Brisa records the Shita of Chachamim as Yotzi. Not Yotzi Olamis, Yotzi, and then it's L'Shiagia Zmano Lichnos Yichnos after 24 months. But nevertheless, Yotzi has to divorce his wife. Shmamina, we see clearly that Rav is correct, and that according to the Chachamim of Rabbi Meir, he has to divorce his wife. We're not going to allow them, as we said before, to live separate lives for the 24-month period of being separated one from the other. Now, again, what does this mean in terms of a Kohen? If a Kohen goes ahead and marries a Muberes or a Menekes, violating the Isa D'Rabbanan that enjoins him from doing so, and now even according to the Chachamim of Rabbi Eliezer, of Rabbi Meir, who are more maker, nevertheless we've established he has to divorce his wife, that's it. Right? That's finito. He can never remarry her. He's a Kohen. He can't marry a Grusha, even if it's his own Grusha. Is there any room for leniency in this case of a Kohen? To have a little bit more compassion on a Kohen and flexibility, even though he deserves to be tarred and feathered for marrying a woman who is a Muberes or a Menekes. Maybe in this case we'll separate them, the Kohen from his wife, until the termination of the 24-month period, and then he can resume his marriage relation with her, because otherwise the alternative is Yotziena beget. And if you're forcing him, compelling him to give a get, he will never ever be able to marry this woman. Tanya. We have a brisa in Masechet Shabbos. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Kol Sheshah Adam Shloshim Yomeinu Nefel. Again, we're going to get back to our discussion about Menekes and Muberes in the case of an Eishes Kohen in a minute, but for the time being, put that in the back burners, because we're going to direct our attention to a new issue. And the issue is going to be, at what point do we establish that the Vlad, after birth, is viable? How long of a period of time do we have to wait to prove and establish that the baby is a viable baby? And this, of course, is relevant to Yibum, to Masechet Yevamot. And it's going to be a case which is a little bit tragic. It's hard for me to even talk about this, but imagine where the Yevama, right, let's say Reuven Olav Shalom's wife, was pregnant at the time of Reuven's death. She gave birth to a baby, and never the baby died. Not because the baby was a stillborn, but the baby got into a very bad accident. And as a result, it was killed. You know, when I think of this Gemara, you've heard many times, especially here in Israel, so painful when you hear about, you know, parents who left a baby in a car, and you know what I'm talking about? It's hard to even describe it. And you could prosecute the parents, you know, for causing the death of the baby. These stories are terribly tragic. So now the question becomes, in Hilchos Yibum and Chalitza, does the wife fall for Yibum? On the one hand, she gave birth to a viable being, but on the other hand, the baby died before its 30-day birthday party, its first month's birthday party. It didn't die as a result of or at least let's put it this way, we don't know, had it not been that this tragic accident took place, would the baby have survived for the 30 days? No one can know the answer to that question. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer Kol Sheshah Be'adam Shloshim Yom, if the baby lives for 30 days after birth, Eino Nefa. It's what we call Yatsa Mechal Nefa. It has a full-fledged status as a vlad, and therefore she would not need neither chalitza nor yibum, because her late husband left zera, left a viable being. That's the statement of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Nebrais. Now the Gemara is going to analyze this from the fact that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says Shah, lo Shah, the flip case, whenever the baby died tragically before its 30th day birthday, Sveika, we really don't know what the status of this vlad is. Had the vlad survived, would it have survived? Maybe it would have died of natural causes because it never was a viable. And that's called in the Gemara's language Sveika. And what's the repercussion of Sveika? It means that she, the mother of this baby that was killed before its 30th day, she needs chalitza, but no yibum. That's what we call choletzes below misyabemes. And why is that so? Because we have a suffix. We don't know whether the vlad is a nefel or it was a viable being. If it was a viable being, then she doesn't need neither chalitza nor yibum. But if the vlad would have died anyway of natural causes, then she needs yibum or chalitza. But we're in a situation where it's a suffix. We don't know what to do with it. And therefore, she will require chalitza, but no yibum. The itmar, based b'tok shloshim yom, if the baby died within 30 days, and then Amda Viniskadja, she went ahead and she got married to someone else other than the Yavam. That's called Echad Min Hashuk. Now, she felt that she had the right to marry someone else simply because she had a vlad, and the vlad looked and was, in fact, absolutely healthy. At least that's what it is on the books. And now we have to ask the following question. What should be the status of this Yevama who got married to someone min hashuk, and then, as it turns out, the baby died. Well, baby was killed. Ravinovich made the Rava. We're going to have two versions, two transmissions of Rava. According to Ravina's transmission of Rava, since Rabbi Gamliel holds that we have here a suffix, we don't know if the Vlad is a Nefel or a Ben Kayama. Therefore, if Eishes Yisrael he choletzes, she's going to require chalitza. Eishes Koheni eina choletzes. Hilei Plon. This is an unbelievable Gemara. This Ravina Mishmei the Rav. Where do we find? I have never encountered a Gemara of this sort where there's an Iser, and we're not going to apply that Iser to a Kohen. It usually goes the other way around. We have more Chumras and Isurim that apply to a Kohen than to Yisrael. Here, we're going to be more flexible, according to Ravina in the name of Rabbah, on behalf of the Kohen. Because if we force the Kohen to divorce her, he'll never be able to remarry her. And not only that, we're not even going to require chalitza from the Yavam. We're going to assume that, we have a suffix, but we're going to assume one side of the suffix, namely that this was a viable baby. And if not for the tragedy that took place, the baby would be alive and well. Now, again, this is all based on a Gemara at the end of Masechet Shabbos. Closest in this at the end of Masechet Shabbos points out that this Gemara of Ravina is based on what's called Rov. And that means that Rov Noshim Yoldos Ben Kayom. If we don't have any evidence to the contrary, then we assume that she gave birth to a viable child. Again, we'll see how that's going to change, perhaps in the case of a preemie, if she gives birth after 7 months. But in any event, we have now a Rov, and Tosfos says that Ravina is standing on this Rov. He's basing himself on the Rov. The baby died tragically, but it would have lived if not for that tragedy. Why? Because Rov Noshim Yoldos Ben Kayoma. So in the case of a woman who is this Kachali Yisrael, he's not a Kohen, we're not going to rely on that Rov. He shouldn't have married her. We should have waited until she gave birth and we'll see what happens. So in such a case, halacha is that she requires chalitza on the tzad that maybe this baby was not a viable baby. But if in the case of an Ashes Cohen, then we're going to fall back on the road. So I'm going to assume that the baby was a viable baby. We have no reason to assume otherwise. The tragedy that happened, and she didn't fall for evil. I'm sorry. What did I just say? I'm talking about an Ashes Yisrael, not an Ashes Cohen. So in the case of an Ashes Yisrael, we're going to have to consider the possibility that maybe this baby, because it didn't live till the 30th day, is a nefel. And if it's a nefel, she must have chalitza. Rav Masharshia, which made the Rava Omar, achazu v'achazu choletzes. Even in the case of an Ashes Cohen, we're going to require chalitza. And that means that he will never be able to marry. He writes here, Afim is kacha lekohen neseres lebayla. And why? She yesh lochush l'divrei Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Sherak b'shah shloshim yom yotze b'chlal nefel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says we only know for sure that it's not a nefel when it reaches its 30-day birthday. Here it didn't reach that 30th day, so we're left with a suffix. And in the case of a suffix, she can't marry anyone without chalitza. And the truth be told, that Rav Masharshia intuitively makes a lot more sense than Ravina. But Amalei Ravina or Rav Masharshia, we will turn to Daf Lamed Zayin. The Urta Amar Rava Hachi, you're right. You quoted Rava correctly when you said that Im Eishes Koini Eina Choletzes, but Ba'erev, Ba'urta, means that night he said Amar Rava. But B'tzafra, when he woke up the next morning, after he rethought the whole sugya, Hadarbe, he rescinded his original position. He was Choser Bo. And what I heard from Rava, that in the case of Ashes Cohen, we don't require chalitza, we're going to rely on the rove, that I heard in the morning. You heard it at night. Because in the meantime, over the 12 hours between last night and this morning, Rava changed his mind. And therefore, says Rav Misharshia, says Ravina, the final conclusion of Rava, B'tzafra, was that Ashes Kohen Muteres Lishor Etzel V'enav Choletzes against Rav Misharshia. Because what you, Rav Misharshia, heard, so claims Ravina, is what you heard from Rava at night. But in the morning, the next day, Rava changed his mind. And he had more compassion on the Kohen and his wife. So could you imagine, Rabbi said, what's going on over here? We're going to be makil in the case of a Kohen, and we're going to just simply remove chalitza, remove the requirement of chalitza just because he's a Kohen. With all due respect to a Kohen. But we have a bona fide suffix here because Rav Shimon Gamliel says it's only when the baby lives to the age of 30 days that we know it's Yotze B'chal Neifel. This baby never lived to the age of 30. Again, for another reason, but it doesn't matter. L'maisa, we don't know that there's every child, every newborn baby until it reaches the age of 30 is a suffix Neifel. How can you possibly do away with chalitza for the sake of a Kohen? So Rav Misharshia gives a mashal. Ravina, you want to be makil and be lenient in the halacha. I mean, there's no way you could be lenient here and do away with the requirement of chalitza. According to Rav Shimon Gamliel, says that it's not a ben kayom until after day 30. This baby didn't make it to day 30 for whatever reason. And therefore, sharisu yeirava the tishtru af tirba. If you're going so far to be matir, this case of an Ashes Kohen, when the Vlad died in the middle of 30 days, that's a big coup. You're taking something that's apparently usher and you're being makil on it. Then you might as well tell us good news, Ravina, and be makil even on chelev. Chelev is something that the Torah prohibits, but why don't you go ahead and permit it? I think he's being facetious here. All right, so now the Gemara takes a break from the case of Neifel as far as chalitza is concerned, whether or not we could be makil for the Ashes Kohen in order to protect the marriage from being destroyed. But now the Gemara wants to go back to the case of Muberes and Meinikas. And we said that if a man marries a Meinekes or a Muberes, he's got to divorce his wife. And we assumed even according to Rabbanan of Rabbi Meir, he would have to divorce his wife. Now, again, if it's an Ashes Kohen, you're really coming hard down on this, you're destroying this marriage forever and ever. So now Rav Ashi turns to Rav Oshia and he says, Hacha, my, meaning what would you say in this case? Maybe in this case you'll agree that we could be more lenient and flexible on behalf of Kohen. What's the case? L'gabi Muberes chaver Meinikas chaver nesul l'Kohen. My, mi ovid rabbanan takanto l'Kohen. Can't the Rabbana make a special takana on behalf of the Kohen if he married a Muberetz or Meinekes, and to be lenient and just separate them until the 24-month period passes by without requiring a get? Olam. Amalei, Sir of Oshia, responds to Ravina. No, actually, here it's to Rav Ashi, right? Haki Ashta. Can you make a comparison to these two cases? Case number one, where the question is whether the Eishes Kohen needs chalitza, and case number two, as to whether or not the Eishes Kohen will have to receive a divorce and will force the Kohen to divorce his wife. In the case of the tragedy of a baby that died before its 30th day, and you want to know whether or not, in a case of Kidsha, whether or not he has to divorce her, or at least she needs chalitza, came at the Ikar Rabbanan, the Pligel of Shimon Gamliel. Rabbanan disagree with Rav Shimon Gamliel, the Amri, and they maintain the Afa Gavdalo Shah, Vlad Ma'al we can rely on Rove that the Vlad is a healthy Vlad, even if we haven't gotten to its 30th birthday. That's fine. But Lagabe Eishes Kohen, you can't give a chalitza without passing her to kahuna. It's therefore Keman Navid, Ikarabi Meir, Ha'omar Yotzi v'lo Yachzer Olavis, v'Ikarabanan, Ha'amri Beged. You're in trouble here, no matter which shita you take, whether you go with Rabbi Meir or you go with Rabbanan. There's no way that we could be makil on behalf of the Kohen. Because if we accept Rabbi Meir, he says in general, lo yachzir olavis, and he doesn't differentiate between an Eishes Kohen and Eishes Yisrael. And if you can go with the Rabbanan Shita, they're the ones who say Yotzianu Beget. So it seems like in this particular scenario, there's no possibility of leniency, of being makil. And therefore, the husband who's a Kohen will have to divorce his wife, and Asura Olav Li Olav. Okay, then this is where we'll stop for today. It's Hashem here on Daf Lamed Zayin. And we're up to Itmar. We're up to Itmar Kidsha, which is how many lines down from the top? About 10 lines down. Okay then? So it's good to see you, Don. I hope you're feeling well.
Thank you, much better.
Great. Okay, hopefully you'll feel better and better by the minute.
Thank you.
Okay, good to see you. Bye-bye. Have a great day.